This is Gemara Baba Kama Daf Samoch Vav Baruch Hashem. As we try to stay ahead of the Daf, today's learning has been sponsored by a close friend of the Daf, a schos to be able to learn together, Baruch Hashem, in good health, as a schos Aliyas Neshama for his father Arya ben Ya'akov B'siyata Dishmaya. The learning of the entire Chabura should bring Arya ben Ya'akov to higher and higher place in Gan Eden Shel Ma'ila. And we're holding on to Samachayim and Beis. We're approximately 10 lines from the bottom at the two dots. Maskiv la Rav Zira, and Rav Zira is discussing the din of if one steals a younger ram, which is called a lamb, and it matures into a ram, is that transformation, that growth, does that create that the owner, that the bailim acquire and are kaineh the animal? So we said yesterday that the thief, the ganof, does not. So Maskiv la Rav Zira, ask Rav Zira, why is that true? The ganav should acquire the animal. Apologize with Shini Hashem. The animal changes its name, and even though there might not be a physical change in the animal, but the fact that it goes from a lamb to a ram, that itself should be enough to have a kinyan by the ganav. Amar Rava explains, Shar ben Yoimai Karui Shar Ayel ben Yoimai Kari Ayel. Says Rava, an ox, even back on day one, is an ox. It's true, it's a younger ox. It's true, we're going to have a name for it in the baby stage, in the infant stage. But it's still considered an ox. It's similarly an ayil, a ram. It's true, when it's young, we're going to call it a lamb. But lamaisa, it is a ram, and therefore there's going to be not considered a shini Hashem. And proves Rava is din. Shar ben Yaimai Kari Shar. How do I see that? The Chsiv says the Torah. Shar oy kesev oy eis ki yivaleit. So we see it's called a shar even at birth. Ayel ben Yaimai Kari Ayel. The Chsiv says the Torah of Ayel tain chaloi achalti elim hu d'loi achal kvasim achal. So what do we see in the pasuk? Excuse me, elim hu d'loi achal kvasim achal. Elalav, rather, what does the pasuk mean? Shamin ayel ben Yaimai Kari Ayel. It's called an ayel. So Rava proves that there's no Shinui Hashem, because in reality, the animal does not change the name. It was called a shar from birth, and it was called an ayil for birth. Continues the Gemara, Mikol Makom Kasha. This really is a little bit of a deep question based on the top of the Amud, which was yesterday's daf, that the Gemara wants to know that when this ganaf goes and he is toiveach oy machar, he slaughters or he sells the lamb, the calf that he stole, and then the animal matures, what do we say? He has to pay dalid vehei. But the problem is, we saw on the top of the Amud that Rav Chanina was bothered that from the Braisa, that when the animal changes from this younger animal into this older animal, this lamb to this ram, etc., so that why is there the payment of Dalad Vehei? The payment of Dalad Vehei is only if it is the same animal that he stole. He was Teveach, he was Meicher. That was the rule that Rav Illa taught us. So I asked Rav Chanina from the Braisa, the animal now is no longer the same animal. Whether you're going to tell me he was kainit or not, but it should negate the payment of Dalid Vehei. So explains the Gemara, Amar Rav Sheshes Amani, Beishamai Damar Shinoi, Bime Kaimai Oimedes. Says Beishamai that when there is a Shinoi, that even when there is a change in the animal remains in its possession. V'loi kani, and there is no kinyan, and therefore likewise over here it will be considered the same animal, and there'll be, yes, a payment of dalad v'hei. The Tanya, as we learned in a brayso, or 4 lines from the bottom of Samachayim and Beis, Nasan Allah bes nena chitin. Says the brayso, if one gave a zainab payment as wheat chitin, v'asan sailes, and they were made into flour. Zaitim, if olives were given as payment for a zaina, vasa and shemen, they're made into oil. Anavim, grapes, vasa yayin, tirichada aser, v'tirichada mutter. We have two different braysos, and the question is, once the item changes its form, does it still have a din of an esnan, which is when one pays a zaina, when one pays a woman for inappropriate activities, the item that is utilized as the payment receives this name of an esnan zaina, and that item cannot be used as a carbon. So the question is, if the item now was transformed from olives into olive oil, from grapes into wine, is it still aser? So we have two different prices. One says aser, one says mutter. V'omar Rav Yosef, tini goryana demis as a pork. Goryana misas pork taught. Beishamai oisrein and Beisilel matirin. So Beishamai is the one that's going to say that this item remains in the status of an esnan. Why? Explains the Gemara, my time to Beishamai. Tersev in the last line, Gam l'rabois shinu yehem. Beishamai says that when the Torah is discussing paying a zaina, there's an extra gam. And what does the gam come to say? It comes to say that even when the item changes its form, it is not change ownership, is not a real change, and therefore it's still not allowed to be used as a carbon. According to Beishamai, what does he do with the word haim? Hahu haim, as we turn over to Samach Vavam and Aleph, says the Gemara, according to Beishamai, Hahu haim, that word of haim comes to teach us Viloi, Veladoi sehem. Only it itself and not that which is born from the item. Who does so? Beis Hillel. Tarti shmas mina heim v'loy shinu yeyem heim v'loy v'ladoi seyem. And now, of course, the Gemara ping-pongs backwards. Just before we continue, let's just remind ourselves why we got involved in this conversation. Because we just said a moment ago that in order to answer up the kasha on Rav Illa, Rav Chanina's kasha, why the Ganav has to pay Dalin V'hei, even though the animal that he stole is seemingly not the same animal that was Tevei Chai Meicher, not the same animal that was slaughtered or stolen. According to Beis Shammai, it's Shinoi b'Mekoymai Oimedes. It stays in its place, as we're seeing over here, that even though there was a Shinoi, the olives turned to oil and the grapes turned to wine. According to Beis Shammai, it's the same item and it cannot be used as a carbon, as he learned from Gam. Beis Hillel disagreed and he learned from Haim. We now know what Beis Shammai does with Haim. Continues the Gemara 3 lines down. So what does Beis Hillel do with Gam? Beis Hillel aksiv Gam. Gam leBeis Hillel kasha. Says the Gemara. Good question. So now continues the Gemara, again circling back to Rav Illa and Rav Chanina of yesterday, that there is a payment of Daled V'hei of even after the animal matures into an older animal. Ad kan, says the Gemara again, 4 lines down, Vavam and Aleph. Ad kan loy pligi, meaning Rav Chanina and Rav Illa, as the top Rashi keys us in, as it's been in Amid since we've seen the original Machlaikes. So Ad kan loy pligi, says the Gemara, Demar Savar, Demar holds Shinoi Kaina. I'm sorry that I'm trying to. This is not working. I apologize. Okay, there we go. Now we can see the page a little bit better. Ad kan lo yipeligi el demar savar shinei kaina, omar savar ein shinei kaina. That the machlekes Rav Illa and Rav Chanina was that Rav Illa holds shinei kaina, and that's the reason for his din of Daled V'hei, and that's the reason why that when it comes to the Daled V'hei, there will be a payment. Why? Again, because Shinoi is a kinyan to the owner. Omar Savar Rav Chanina holds Shinoi. No, I said, yeah, excuse me. Omar Savar, yes, and Rav Chanina holds Ein Shinoi Kaina. There's no kinyan, and therefore, let's say this again. I apologize. Rav Chanina holds Ein Shinoi Kaina. So the owner does not kaina the animal. That's why there's yes a payment of Daled V'hei. Whereas according to Rav Ilah, Shinoi Kaina, and therefore there is no payment of Dalad V'Hei because he was Kaina the animal. Therefore, it's not the same animal now with regard to the Tzvicha Mechira. Therefore, there's no payment. Aval Le'inyan Shlumi, continues the Gemara. But with regard to paying for the animal, Kulei Alma, everyone holds, Kimeikara Mishalim. They're all going to agree that the kefel, the dalid, the hay, all these payments go at the value of the animal when it was stolen. Dikatani, Bashanta Shulei Kefel, Tashlumei, dalid, the hay, Kain, Sheganav. So says the Gemara, now that we see that Rav Allah and Rav Chanina are all in agreement with the fact you pay Kain Sheganav, Lematav Tiyov to Dirav, Damarav Karen Kain Sheganav, Mishal Tashum Kefov, Tashum Dalvei, Kishas Amadas Bedin. So says the Gemara, seemingly Rav Chanina and Rav Ilah coming along, and it should be Akasha on Rav, because Rav said that it's not true. We saw this yesterday. Rav said that Dalad Vehei goes, Kefel goes by time of Amad Bedin, when the animal's in court. Only the Keren goes by the Shaskizela, Shaskineva. Amar Rava answers about 12 lines down. The first one line is Amar Talayim Kidmeikara. When it comes to Aleam, Kefel, Dalvei, everything goes when it was originally stolen. Damim Kishalach. When it comes to money, that's when it goes to now. So there's no kasha. They're talking about two different cases. So Amar Rabbah. And after wrapping up Rav Chanina, Rav Ilah, this kasha and Rabbah, says the Gemara, let's go back to the conversation we had a moment ago. What is the story with Shinoi acting as a kinyan? Or I should say better, at what point the Ganav is considered that he is kaina this item. So Amar Rava Shinoi kaina. When there's a Shinoi, then the Ganav is kaina. Ksiva utinina. It's a pasuk and it's a mishnah. Ksiva says the pasuk is Gazal. Return that which you stole. Matam Alamer Shegazal. What does it say? That which you stole. Imkein Shegazal Yachsir. Simple, says the Gemara, because if it's like the way you stole it, then there's a din, there's a rule, you got to return it because you did not acquire it. Vimla, but if it's not Kein Shegazal, then Damim Ba'alma Ba'yishlumi, then you only have to pay for the value because you were kayin it. That's the pasuk. Tanina, we have a mishnah. If someone steals wood and he makes kalim out of it, utensils, semer, wool, vasan begadim, mishalem kishas zela. He pays at the time of the stealing. Inami lo hispek litnai lo yad shesava. If he didn't give it back until it was dyed, potter, then he is potter. So what do we see? We see al moshinoi kaineh. We see both by the pasuk and from the Mishnah that once a shinoi is effected on the item, the Ganav is considered to have a kinyan in the item. Continues the Gemara, other ways that a Ganav, one who steals something, is kind of the item. Yosh, if the owner despairs from ever getting back his item, Amri Rabbanan denikni. Similarly, the Rabbanan say that via the despair of the original owner, the Ganav acquires this item. However, says the Gemara, and I do not know, idaraisa idarabon. I don't know, is Yish a kinyan midaraisa midarabon? Midaraisa, and explains the Gemara the Shaila. Is it a kinyan daraisa midavia moitzi aveda? There's like someone who finds an aveda. Moitzi aveda lav kivin to me aish mara. When the original owner despairs me now, makmi detesi liyade, before it comes to the one who finds it hands. Kanile, so he who finds it acquires it. Hainami, our case as well. Kivan demiyayish, since the original owner despairs, Mara kanile, therefore he is kainet. Almas, what do we see? Kini. So we see that there's a kinyan even on the de'araisa level. But says the Gemara, oidelmo, or maybe loidam yolaveda. Why not? There's a fundamental difference. The Veda was a heter, you're allowed to take it. Maybe it's only din derabanan, but not a din daraisa. So says the Gemara, we do not know what it is. The Rav Yosef Amar, Yosh einai kaine va'afilu midrabanan. Rav Yosef argues entirely, and Yosef says there's no kinyan via Yosh, even derabanan. Now these two dots are a little bit misplaced. But meaning because the Gemara is really going to continue this conversation of Yosh being kaina. So again, let's just be clear. Rabbah said Shinoi Kaineh, and then the Gemara said, according to Rabbah, Yosh is Kaineh. Yosh, we just don't know, is it a kinyan deraisa to Rabban? Rav Yosef argued, and Rav Yosef said Yosh is Einoi Kaineh. So Eis Vei Rav Yosef LeRabbah, on the last line of Samach Vavam and Aleph, Rav Yosef, who holds that Yosh is not in a kinyan. When the owner despairs, it does not effect an acquisition by the he who stole it. As the Rabbah holds, it does affect an acquisition. Gazal chametz, Vaver love Pesach. Someone stole chametz, and then Pesach passes by as we turn over to Samach Vav Amud Beis. Oimer loy, the Ganav could say to the owner, Arei shel chalaf anecha. Here's your item. I'm returning that which I stole. I'm returning the chametz that I stole, and here it is. Now in this case of chametz, kiven demata idan isura. Once the time of the isra of chametz comes, meaning Pesach, vaday miyayish. The owner for sure despaired because at this point he can't get any benefit from it. It's Pesach. So if you're going to tell me that Yish, and therefore he who stole it has a kinyan, why is he allowed to say to him, take back that which is yours? He should have to pay for the full value. He should have to pay what the chametz was worth when he stole. And of course, what's going on over here is that when it comes to chametz, when Pesach passes by, this owner, it's valueless. Because chametz shavuot Pesach, he can't get any value from it. So over here, the chiddush was, you're allowed to say Rishal Chalav Anecha right now, because whatever damage is Einoi Nicker, is not recognizable. But the kash of the Gemara is 1 second. If Yosh was a kinyan, then we should have to say that the Ganaf was koinet, and he should have to pay the regular value of the item at the time that he stole it. Responds Rabbah Marlei, 4 lines down. Ki kamina no. When do I say that there's a kinyan, there's an acquisition via Yosh? Zemit yayesh is only when you have 2 ingredients. The owner despairs, and he who stole it wants to have a kinyan. Hi, but in this case, zemit yayesh. True, the person despairs because it's Pesach. But the other guy doesn't want to acquire it simply because chametz is aser on Pesach. So continues the Gemara with another kasha to Rabbah that says Yosh Kaineh. 6 lines down, says in the Torah, Karbana, if the Ila is his Karban, V'loi HaGoyzil, and we darshin, has to be Karbana, his Karban, and not a stolen Karban. Hechidam was the case. If you're going to tell me the original owner did not despair yet. Lamali Kra, what do I need a pasik? Pshita, of course, it's not yours, so of course you can't bring it as a Karban. Elalav Lachar Yosh. Must be the original owner despaired, and therefore the Gana of he who stole it essentially acquired it, and the Chedesh is you can't bring it as a Karban. So Shema Mina. So what do we see from here? Yosh Loi Kaina. So must be that Yosh is not a kinyan. Says the Gemara Malay Rava L'Taimech. According to that which you're saying, Hadetanya. That which you learned in a Braisa, Mishkavai, V'loi HaGoyzel, says the Braisa, with regard to Tumas Azav, an emission from a man, which makes things tamei, mishkavai, that which he sits on, his couch, is tamei to the evening. V'loy hagazel, that only when it's mishkavai, but it sounds like not a couch that he stole. But says the Gemara, Hechidami, how can you say such a thing? If he stole wool and he made it into a couch, everyone agrees that if it was shinoi ma'isa, if you did an action, that of course is a kinyan. What do you have to say? The gazel mishkav the chavre. You stole the chair, the couch of your friend. Hachinami, and that's the reason why there's going to be tuma on the item. And that's why mishkavai, it is yours right now, but it's coming to say a case where you stole the item of your friend. Hachinami, we have to say the gazel carbon, the chavre, and therefore there's no kasha on Rabbah at all. Continues the Gemara again with this machlekes whether Yosh is kaina. Rabbah says yes, and Rav Yosef says no. So at the two dots, approximately 20 lines down, now the tables turn, and the Gemara asks, Eisei Abayel Rav Yosef. You, Rav Yosef, hold that Yosh is not a kinyan. Says in the Mishnah, Oyros shel balabayis. If I have Oyros, you have hides belonging to a balabayis machshava mitamasan. Thought, literally, that the item is complete, is that which makes it be mekabel tama. V'shel avdan. But if the hides, the Oyros, again, animals' skins and hides that they would tan and whatnot and make it into clothing and leather, etc. Shall abdan, if it's belonged to a tanner, a professional, ein machshava mitumasan, then it's not up to the machshava. Shall ganav, continues the Gemara, if it's the hides of a ganav, machshava mitumasan. Shall gazlon, someone who steals with force, broad daylight, ein machshava mitamasen. Rav Shimon Aimer chilav advarim. Says Rav Shimon, shel gazlo machshava mitamasen ganav ein machshava mitamasen. Why does Rav Shimon switch around the shitos? Lefi sheloi nisya yishua bailim. Says Rav Shimon, because there's no yish on a ganav by a gazlo, and then he knows who was stolen. Then there's yish, but not by a ganav. So what do we see clearly from this brayso? So the way that Rav Shimon is explaining it, Shema Mina, Yiyosh Kaine, clearly, so Yiyosh, the owner's despair, is the critical ingredient that makes the ganav acquire it. So asks the Gemara and Rav Yosef, you said Yiyosh Loi Kaine. We see clearly here, yes. Amar Lei responds, Rav Yosef, Achamei Eskina Gonche, Kits on, talking about a case where the robber cut and changed the hide. That is the reason why there is a kinyan. But the Gemara is not happy with that. Maskiv la Rabba. Maskiv la Rabba Babarchanav aloi itzva shanu. But the Mishnah is also talking about an itzva, a tray. Itzva shanu kan. The itzva ein sricha kitzua. You don't have to cut the tray. We learned to the Mishnah called Magav Shein Chisaray Milacha. There's no Chisar Milacha. If there's no Milacha that has to be done on the item, then it's all up to Machshava. Machshava mitamasan. Yesh Chisar Milacha. If it needs to do work, then ain't Machshava mitamasan. Chos Mina Hitzva. There's a special din with regard to a tray. That since a tray does not need anything. Therefore, the Machshava to leave it and to use it in its state is that which makes him mikabel tama. So what do we see? We see that it's tali in machshava, and therefore we see that Yosh is going to have a kinyan, a kasha on Rav Yosef. Ela maraba. So Ela marava, Rava explains 10 lines at the bottom. First one is hi milsa kasha ba Rabba le Rav Yosef. Rabba asked Rav Yosef with this kasha for Esrim mitartin shrin. For 22 years, this was a kasha to Rav Yosef, that we see that Yosh is kind of from the fact that the Mishnah clearly details the rules of being Makabal Tama with Kelim based on the owner's Yosh. V'loi African Rav Yosef never had a teretz. Adi Yosef Rav Yosef Bereisho Birka. Till Rav Yosef, after Rabba was Nifter, became Rosh Hashiva, and he answered as follows. Shinoi Hashem ke shinoi maisa dami. that over here it's not just the Yush. The Yush affects, in this case, the Machshava. That the item changes its name, and therefore that's considered like an action. Shine Maisa Maitaima, that it affects an acquisition. Also, Meikara Eitzim Ashta Kalim. Shini Hashem as well. Nami Meikara Karle Mishchav Ashta Avarzon, and now it's called a tray, and therefore that's the reason why there's going to be a kinyan with it. We're going to stop over here. We'll continue tomorrow with more kashas on Rav Yosef with regard to whether Shina is kaina, as Rav Yosef, Yosh is kaina, as Rav Yosef says it's not, and Rabbah says it is.